You're watching this special coverage of the King and the Queen's visit, and this afternoon assignments awaiting the royal family here in the county of Nairobi. First, starting off with the city shamba. Now the King and the Queen have been received by Nairobi County Governor Johnson Sakaja, and one of the areas that the United Kingdom and Kenya are focusing on is promotion of youth opportunities and employment, advancing sustainable development and creating more stable to the job creation for young Kenyans. And here he at the moment is at his next assignment, where he is being explained to the opportunities for the young people through empowerment, and that includes the creation of empowerment opportunities, where in an area of cooperation it is for both the governments of the United Kingdom and Kenya. And here the officials are explaining to him some of what's on display as a result of venture into the area of technology and the ICT space by young Kenyans, and the advantage this has had, this being the second visit of the King to, and his next stop, where he is being taken through some of the accomplishments and achievements attained by young Kenyans who have ventured into the area of ICT and the digital space, an area also both governments have invested in so much. That includes, of course, what was just shortly mentioned by the United Kingdom Foreign Secretary James Cleverly. He talked about the importance of digitization of the economy, and there in which he said lies the opportunity for young Kenyans to prosper, create jobs and support their livelihoods. And it is therefore what informs the King's stop here at the youth center, where he has at the moment taken through some of the items on display, including the youth climate tech, where the areas, it is among the areas that the King had touched on, and also both governments of the United Kingdom and Kenya have listed as an area of cooperation and reflection on how Kenya and Britain are working together on a wide range of issues, such as the promotion of youth opportunities through economic programs, and wherein he at the moment is standing youth and climate tech. Youth and climate tech is what he is at the moment, where he is, and is specifically his area of focus, which King Charles has for a very long time passionate about, and specifying on the aspect about the venture into these spaces, and also tackling some of the consequences of climate change, and his admiration for the progress made by young Kenyans who have also made their space in terms of the curbing of climate consequences and the catastrophe. And he has been, of course, candidly so open about his personal views, and he said that he will not speaking about the topics he felt strongly about when he became king. And as an environmentalist, of course, a champion for environmentalism and also organic farming, where he was city shamba, now here at the youth center, where he is being taken through some of the innovations attained by young Kenyans. Here is the Nairobi garage where the King is. It was his next stop. Also still in the company of the King is the Prime Cabinet Secretary and the Foreign Affairs CS Musalia Mudavadi. And being an environmentalist, the King says that many of the warnings about the risk of plastic waste and gases pumped out by endless cars and aeroplanes is what's causing some of the climate consequences across the world. The King, who was Prince Charles then at the age of 21, made a landmark speech on environment at a countryside conference in Cardiff in 1970. That was when he was still a prince, and warned of the presently about the impact of pollution, gas emissions and overpopulation. He said, when you think there are 55 million of us on this island using non-returnable bottles and indestructible plastic containers, it is not difficult to imagine the mountains of refuse that we shall have to deal with. This was what he said in 19 70 exactly is 6, that is 53 years ago, when he was still the Prince of Wales, when his mother was on the throne, and which he attributed largely to some of the also expression of discontent from other world agencies, including the United Nations and the consortium of scientists who continue to ring the alarm bell over the consequences of climate change across the world, and why there is need for more commitment beyond the aspirations and agreements that lack in teeth in many aspects, and therefore commitments to paying up for the climate adaptation and the impact this has had on especially the global south, largely the African continent. Let's proceed with this and listen in to what the king has been taken through at the Nairobi garage.
So introduce you, this is Meredith. She's our head of electric finance.
Yeah, so one of the
Only electric finance, yeah.
yeah, so one of the things that through carbon project financing, we're able to subsidize the cost of the stores. So an example is a $10 million investment in a carbon project in 250,000 stores. That is 1 million lives impacted and generate close to 4 million tons of CO2 for the environment.
Well, I know we both care about the climate, so like for us, there's
Still taken through some of the innovations at the Nairobi garage, and what the United Kingdom High Commission here in Nairobi said is the commission in Kenya which will go a step further by refusing the traditional pomp of diplomatic visits and with the vibrant street culture of Nairobi's matatu culture. And here is at the Nairobi garage, where the king is being taken through some of the innovations achieved, and of course largely also focusing amongst them in the long list on climate change and the consequences, wherein the explanations are made to him and his delegation onto the importance of the same. And being an environmentalist, a speech he made about 53 years ago, talking about the consequences of climate change and the use of plastic bottles and gas emissions, which he said will have adverse effects on the world. And he has been keen in developing a foundation and finding a partnership also on getting funds for the forestalling of the climate catastrophe, where he has been vocal and expressly so about the climate change impact across the world and how this is having effects in terms of droughts and flooding in many parts of Europe, droughts in southern part of the world, and also monsoon winds and typhoons in largely parts of Asia and in the Americas, where he said that many of the warnings are being ignored, and his calls amplified by the scientists across the world and lobby groups who continue to push for more funding for adaptation for countries that are not big polluters but still bear the consequences of climate change, including the conferences being held from the Paris Climate Agreement signed in 2015 in the French city of Paris to the 2021 COP26 climate conference in the Scottish city of Glasgow, where a member of the United Kingdom, a member of Parliament, then Alok Sharma, had chaired what had transpired then when agreements were signed by the big polluters of the world, and largely some of the aspects that the world was concerned about at the time, despite pointing out reluctance from the big polluters as to the expression of delay in signing of the final agreement, which they said was not sufficient to address some of the consequences across the globe of climate change. And thereafter, COP27 climate conference, which happened a year later in 2022 in the Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh in Africa, which continues to bear also the climate catastrophe and the consequences for some of the, what many say are crimes they are paying for despite not being the big polluters or amongst the league of the polluters. And then the Next climate conference set to happen in under a month's time in the United Arab Emirates in the Middle East, which will of course be again a coming together of the world leaders and the United Nations and environmentalists and parties interested in climate change and the consequences and how they can be curbed. And it is here an area where the King Charles III is passionate about environmentalism and the need for more efforts to mitigate the consequences, and not an issue that he has picked up of late or is recent, but a speech he made 53 years ago when he was still the Prince of Wales, saying that if we are not going to curb or forestall some of the issues that we are seeing, then we are going to pay for the consequences. That was in 1970 in Cardiff in Wales. He said, when you think there are 55 million of us on this island, he meant the United Kingdom, using returnable bottles and indestructible plastic containers, it's not difficult to imagine the mountains of refuse that we shall have to deal with. And here he is being taken through some of the innovations, and he has been very specific about his visits, one which this afternoon started at the City Shamba, which is located at Mama Lucy Hospital along Kangundo Road, with a mission to implement a localized food system through capacity development of urban communities and urban farming, calling on young people to venture into the same, and which he said will improve food security and nutritional levels through urban agriculture. And organic farming is one of his areas that he has been very clear about, and one of his last engagements as the Prince of Wales before ascending to the throne as the King, taking over from his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, who interestingly left the UK as a princess and came to Kenya in the county of Nyeri, then district, and went back as a queen and received by wartime UK Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill after the death of her father. And here, some of the innovations is being taken through, including the provision of clean water. You can see Davis and Shatcliffe Company that the officials taking the King through some of the help that they are rolling out in the provision of clean drinking water across the country. And also the first booth where the King was also taken through the innovation that young Kenyans have made in curbing the consequences of climate change. And again here, step by step at the Nairobi garage, where he was received by Nairobi County Governor. Is still in his company, shoulder to shoulder, is the Foreign Affairs Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, and a host of other officials from the British High Commission who are documenting the King's second assignment this afternoon at the Nairobi garage, which the UK High Commission here in Kenya said is a fusion of traditional pomp of diplomatic visits with some of the vibrant street culture of Kenya's matatu, which has been a point of interest for many who had come to visit Kenya as a result of the interesting matatu culture here in Kenya. The King is now at the Nairobi garage, which is his second afternoon assignment this morning, after holding a meeting with President William Ruto at State House in the company of Queen Camilla, and also First Lady Rachel Ruto, who had met over some of the issues that both governments have highlighted in the areas of what both governments have termed as mutual interest, including agriculture, security, climate change, promoting the employment of youth through empowerment opportunities. And that is one of the assignments that the King is undertaking this afternoon at the Nairobi garage, which according to the UK High Commission is a fusion of traditional pomp of diplomatic visits with the vibrant street culture of Kenya's matatu industry. And first he was at City Shamba, where he had followed up on one of the aspects that he has held so dear, and even talked about it at length in the United Kingdom. One of his last engagements officially as the Prince of Wales before ascending to the throne after the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and at the City Shamba Hotel, which is located at Mama Lucy Hospital along Kangundo Road here in the county of Nairobi, with a mission to implement a localized food system, which he said will help in the capacity development of urban farming and the communities who, he said, can benefit from urban farming, which he said by a large extent will improve food security and nutritional levels through urban agriculture. And this is a point of focus for him. And thereafter, the excitement from the officials who had guided him step by step across the farm where he was shown and also saw, even by practically plucking some of the leaves from the farm, and the venture of young Kenyans into farming and its significance. And this is also an area that the government has talked about, with President William Ruto saying that even the reduction of the living standards in the country depends on food security and meeting our demands, which he said therefore informs his government's policy on the provision of fertilizer to the farmers across the country to boost our farm outputs to meet our food demands. And thereafter, there was the action which happened at the Eastlands Library, where the Education CS Ezekiel Machogu and the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, James Cleverly, signed memorandum of understanding and listed out areas of cooperation, and even how the Kenyan education system has helped to bolster the UK leadership. And the current occupant of 10 Downing Street, the United Kingdom Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's father, studied at Highway Secondary School in Nairobi, and pointing out the cooperation in area of agriculture, talking about how this has been fruitful, including the 2021 Global Education Summit, which was hosted by Kenya and the United Kingdom and raised $4 billion, which he said has gone largely to the developing world in supporting the education systems there. And the UK government support of 500,000 girls from marginalized areas to access education in supporting the government of Kenya. And they after also saying so much needs to be done in the areas of education, talking about the further measures that ought to be adopted between the UK and Kenya, saying that the 1.8 Kenyan children who still lack access to education ought to be supported, and therefore saying that £4.5 million will be the support package for education here in Kenya for the Kenyan government, according to James Cleverly, who had just signed that memorandum of agreement with his Kenyan education counterpart Ezekiel Machogu, and saying that with this will also go in boosting the implementation of the recommendations as contained in the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms, the task force put together by President William Ruto, and which had recommended raft of recommendations set to improve the education sector in Kenya. The King and the Queen still at the Nairobi garage, wherein they are taken through from one step to the other and being shown around with regards to the beauty of the traditional pomp and the vibrant street culture of Nairobi. A while ago, he was taken through some of the innovations that have been made by young Kenyans and which are inclined towards the curbing of the consequences of climate change, which is an area that the King had talked about, not recently, but of course 53 years ago in 1970 as Prince, in a meeting that happened in the city of Cardiff in Wales, where he said that if no action is taken, to quote what he said, then we'll shoulder the consequences. And still been, of course, shown around some of the areas that showcase the beauty of Kenya's culture with pomp, and the industry, the matatu industry, which is largely characterized by graffiti that has seen many tourists, including British tourists, come to Kenya and witness the beauty of the public transport system in Kenya, which is an area that the King and the Queen and the royal family are also so it's important to them and why they visit therefore on his second assignment here at the Nairobi garage, where officials in his company still, he continues to witness the beauty of that matatu culture. And later on, the king, of course, will be shown to the beauty as stated by the UK High Commission, the British High Commission, which also talked about in its list of the areas to be visited by the king, the beauty of the matatu culture. And here, what you're seeing on your screens at the moment, here are the live pictures coming to you from the Nairobi garage, where the king was received by the county governor, Johnson Sakaja, after he was done with his first afternoon assignment at City Shamba, following his morning assignments at State House in Nairobi and at Uhuru Gardens, where he laid a wreath at the graves of the unknown soldiers, which bears significance of Kenya's independence in 1963 from the British colonial government. And on the afternoon assignments, the king is still on his visit to the areas as outlined to be part of his visits in Nairobi County, before proceeding to the county of Mombasa, where the king and the queen are expected to hold a meeting at the mosque with Muslim leaders on Friday, which has a unique architecture of both Omani and Swahili influences. And what's unique about the mosque is that it's the oldest. It also has a minaret built by the Mandari, a family from Oman, in 1570. Located on Sambarak Road, Old Town, about 150 meters from the Old Port, the Mandari Mosque has a unique architecture with Omani and Swahili influences, where he will historically also hold talks with Muslim leaders at the mosque on Friday. The mosque, built before Fort Jesus, and 453 years later, the place of worship, which is overseen by National Museum of Kenya due to its historical cultural heritage, was refurbished ahead of the visit by the royal family from the United Kingdom. It's part of the areas that will be the visits that will be done by the king here in Kenya, and the queen, of course, the beautiful architecture which was built 453 years ago. And this is a special coverage of the visit by the royal family, the king and the queen of the United Kingdom here in Kenya this morning, starting off with a meeting with President William Ruto at State House and also inspecting a guard of honor despite the rain here in the city. Thereafter, the royal entourage proceeded to the Uhuru Gardens that bears historic significance in Kenya's chapter of being an independent country after gaining independence from the British colonial government in 1963. Still in the company of the president, and his afternoon assignments started first at the City Shamba, which a small farm that focuses on organic food and farming, located at Mama Lucy Hospital along Kangundo Road, with a mission to implement a localized food system through capacity development of urban communities on urban farming and the utilization of the available spaces, and improve food security and nutritional levels to urban agriculture, which is an area of focus for the king and one of his last engagements before becoming the King of England as the Prince of Wales after the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. Thereafter, our cameras were turned on the Eastlands Library, where the Education CS Ezekiel Machogu and the UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly also signed Memorandum of Understanding on Education between the UK and Kenya, wherein they talked about the cooperation and areas of cooperation needed, areas of cooperation between both governments, and how that has led to growth, with in some instance having an impact which they say was symbiotic and having it two-way. James Cleverly pointing out the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's father studied at Highway Secondary School in Nairobi before the family relocated to the United Kingdom, where he is currently serving as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from the Conservative Party. And the partnership, which he said continues to bear fruits, talking about the Global Education Summit, which raised more than $4 billion for education in the developing countries, and which he said 500,000 marginalized girls have benefited from education support rolled out by the United Kingdom government, and also the need for the refurbishing of the library where they were to achieve great milestones, and also further commitments of 4.5 million euros to support the education sector in Kenya. And to be specific, pointing out the Presidential Working Party on education reforms and why this visit by the King and the Queen and the royal family is important. James cleverly underscoring the significance of this visit. The third stop for the King now is at the Nairobi garage, where he is still taken through some of the innovations that young Kenyans have made, and with focus on curbing the consequences of climate change and the catastrophic nature of the impact, and how this is an area that the King has been so dear to him and has been passionate about. Still going around the Nairobi garage, being shown around as well, step by step, by officials with speciality in the respective booths that they are standing. Also in his company is Neil Wigan, the UK High Commissioner, the British High Commissioner to Kenya. Some of the other aspects that the King will also do during his 4-day visit, set to end on the 3rd of November, is to meet the UN staff in Nairobi, Kenya being one of the countries with the highest number of UN agencies, faith leaders, including the historic visit he will make to the Mandhri Mosque, which was built in 1570, 453 years ago. Young people where he is meeting at the moment, and being shown around the Kenya Marines training along the British Royal Marines, as well as attending an event celebrating Nobel Peace Laureate Wangari Maathai, who passed on. And here is one of the listed areas of the King, and this live coverage, of course, coming to you, and we are giving you a special coverage of the royal visit here on Royal Media Services and Citizen TV, to be specific. And of course, these are some of the expected, of course, visits that are to be made by the King and the Queen to the specified areas and the different people that they are going to meet in the counties of Nairobi and in Mombasa. The explanations that officials are making for the King, and officials from the British High Commission who has been in his the British High Commission who have been in his company since morning when he first made his visit, and the first meeting he held with President William Ruto, and some of the other outlined visits to be made by the King here in Nairobi and also in the county of Mombasa. Now at the Nairobi garage, where the innovations have centered largely around the curbing of climate change effects and consequences, an area that the King has expressed himself on, saying that it is an issue that he won't stop talking about due to its importance. Also the area of food security and organic farming, and which he said that he himself continues to do organic farming at this moment in Sandringham Estate in Norfolk in the United Kingdom, and the methods which strictly limit the use of antibiotics, which he said has had impacts. And thereafter proceeding to the Nairobi garage, where he was received by Nairobi County Governor and top government officials, still where he is, and in the company of also officials from the British High Commission, and the continuing coverage of this special edition here on Citizen Television of the visit by King Charles III and Queen Camilla's state visit to Kenya that is set to end on the 3rd of November, where they will be also holding a very important and historic meeting at the Mandri Mosque in Mombasa County, which was built 453 years ago by the Mandri family from Oman in the county of Mombasa. And that includes, among the other raft of course, the planned meetings with UN staff here in Nairobi County, many of the UN agencies here in the country, faith leaders, of course, from across the divide, and here where he will be focusing more on unity and the unifying factor that religion can play here in the country and, of course, in the region. Young people and the Kenya Marines training alongside the British Royal Marines, as well as the attendance he will make of an event celebrating Nobel laureate and who has been environmentalist Professor Wangari Maathai, the late, and the king who has been a champion of environmentalism, and not of course recent, but also an initiative that he embarked on 53 years ago when he made a speech in Cardiff in Wales in the United Kingdom, and just at the age of at a tender age, talking about the consequences of climate change, talking about the impact of plastics and also emissions, which he said that if not curbed or controlled will have significant bearing negatively on the world. Other areas, of course, for engagements included the wide range of issues such as boosting the mutual prosperity between the United Kingdom and Kenya, tackling climate change, which is the environment question that we just talked about, the promotion of youth opportunities, where the king is at the moment, and taken through some of the innovations that have been done by many Kenyans, many Kenyans, and employment, of course, venturing into self-employment, where there is less focus on white-collar employment and rather focus on ICT and the digital space for young Kenyans to create employment, advancing sustainable development and creating a more stable and secure region. And of course, the visit of the king, who will witness the vibrance of the street culture of Kenya's matatu industry. And that is what's happening here in the county of Nairobi, and the unity which is said will be brought about if religions can forge a united front on the communication issued by the British High Commission here